Today I'm going to be editing this beautiful baby girl, and I'm going to be using the Little Fox presets, and I'm going to be using the finishing touch actions. So I've already gone through the presets and I selected the one I preferred, which is number 8. And I wanted to show a little bit of how you can tweak the preset if you want to make changes. For example, if the image looks a little too green for you, you can adjust the tint here and add a little bit of magenta. We're editing pink, so I don't want to add too much magenta, so I'm going to keep it the way it was. And you can play around with exposure and highlights. If the highlights are a little too bright, you can bring the whites down or the highlights down. Same with like the blacks or the shadows. And then another thing we can adjust is the Hsl color, and adjusting the hue and the saturation that will alter the skin tone. So if we add a little bit of pink or a little bit of green, I'm actually quite happy here. Maybe I might add a little bit of green there to kind of adjust the pink tones, and then can bring the luminance down a little bit there. Okay, and then after this we can move on to Photoshop. I'm going to go to Library and I'm going to export. And I always export in a Photoshop file. That way I can save as I go. And after this, I'm going to open Photoshop and we're going to edit using the actions. Okay, so now in Photoshop, I'm going to be editing her skin. And first I'm going to start using the skin no blemishes. And I have my actions set to bottom mode. These are the finishing touch actions. And I'm going to make sure my brush is set to 100% opacity, and I'm just going to brush over. Now, the opacity here is quite high, so we're going to, after we brush, we're going to reduce the opacity on the layer. And around the eyes, I'm going to do 50% brush opacity, so it doesn't get rid of all the detail. And then right over here, I'm going to reduce the opacity to somewhere maybe 60%. And then before you run a new action, make sure to merge the layers. There is an action for this over here on the purple. Merge layers, so it does it for you. Then I'm going to run Flawless Finish. And I'm going to brush with 100% opacity, avoiding any lines. And then around the eyes, 50% brush opacity. And then I like to zoom out just to see how we're going. Maybe 80% opacity, actually maybe 85. And then we can merge the layers. And I like to save as I go. And now I'm going to use no reds, just around the red tones here. I'm going to go 100% opacity here. And I'm going to do one layer with like the stronger reds. %70 for that one, and then I'm going to run the action again, and this one I'm going to do like overall. And I'm going to adjust the opacity. And I'm going to zoom out so I can see here. So 20% there. Now I'm going to zoom in here and do a little bit of hand editing. I'm going to copy the background layer and select the patch tool. I'm going to do a very quick and simple hand editing. With the areas that have texture, you want to make sure you don't get rid of the texture, the area that you're selecting. And I like to have a copy of the background layer, so that way if I make any mistakes, I can adjust it, but so far it looks pretty good. And I'm just gonna reduce the opacity there to 90%. Now I'm gonna use skin tone you pick. I'm gonna brush everywhere. And then with the black one, I'm gonna go over the lips because I wanna keep the reds there. And that's at 10% opacity. Now I'm gonna use no purples. This one I will use, I use this action for like purple feet or hands, but I also like to use it for like creamy skin tones. Then select the opacity, maybe I think 15. Then I'm gonna use Sweet Sugar Glow just to kind of tie it all in. Very subtle there. And I'm gonna run Flawless Finish again just for like certain areas. I'm gonna brush over here. And this is just like style, you don't have to do this step. The 20% there. Now I'm gonna do Skin Tone Creamy. And that's 20% opacity. Now I'm gonna do one click background haze. And I'm gonna double click on the color and select the pink that I like. Sometimes I like to kind of play around here with the pinks or the colors. And then select the opacity, maybe 10%. Then I can do Vintage Pink. I'm just gonna brush a little bit on face just to make sure that it's not. Go. And then I'm gonna do a quick before and after. Before and after. I'll do another before and after. And now to bring a little bit of texture back, I'm gonna use Definition Skin. And I'm just gonna brush over skin here. Now I'm gonna do 20% opacity. And now I'm gonna bring some color to her cheeks using Rosy Cheeks. And this one you can use it for lips too, but in this case she doesn't really need it. 4%. And I'm gonna use Night and Day just to add a little bit more definition. With night, I brush over the shadows, and with days, over the highlights. And then I like to copy the background layer and hide the original, merge those layers, and then select the opacity that I want. So 10% there. So we'll do another before and after. And now we're pretty much done with this image. Anything after this would be just whatever you want to add to it. If you want to add edgy finish, which is like a lot of texture, a lot of color, or if you like the matte finish, you can add rustic feels or the matte option. Like for example, rustic feels, it's going to give you that matte finish look. I also like moody finish. You can do like 15% there. And yeah, we can do fix those highlights to bring the highlights down a little bit. And just brush over anywhere that you can see strong highlights. And another one I like is definitions, one of my favorite actions too. Can do 10% there. And then if you still notice a little bit of red, we can use no reds again, and then just go over those tones. Like I'm just noticing a little bit here. And there we go. Now we're pretty much done. Thank you so much for, there we go. And we're pretty much done. Thank you so much for watching. You can get my presets and actions on the link shop below. I'm gonna put it in the captions. I used Little Fox presets and the Finishing Touch Photoshop actions. When you're purchasing my actions, make sure that you have the latest version of Lightroom and Photoshop, and that you have your Photoshop language set to English. Thank you.